Good morning. It's August 8th, 2014, and today marks the 32nd day since Operation Protective Edge began. At this time, 8 a.m., the 72-hour Israel-Hamas ceasefire is due to expire. We have conflicting reports whether Hamas has agreed to extend the ceasefire. Israel has agreed to extend it, and the talks on the long-term agreement are continuing in Cairo, but Hamas has so far not. And as I said, we are getting conflicting reports about that. If Israel does not agree to lift the Gaza blockade, the Hamas military wing said yesterday, attacks on Israel will resume at 8 a.m. We're now having a code red right now on Ashkelon, southern city in Israel. So obviously the rocket attacks have continued. Israel has said that it will take the Hamas threat seriously. It also says it will hit back with heavy force if the attacks resumes. As again, a code red siren has been heard now in Ashkelon, the southern city in Israel. Yesterday in Gaza, some 2,000 people rallied in Gaza City in support of Hamas, where a spokesman claimed that Hamas still has tunnels that extend into Israel to carry out attacks. Meanwhile, earlier this morning, late last night, 2 mortar shells were apparently fired from within the southern Gaza Strip towards Eshkol Regional Council. The shells hit open areas and no injuries were reported. But as we said, started off the 8 a.m. ceasefire has apparently now ended with a code red in Ashkelon. With me in studio is Professor Uzi Rabi, the director of the Moshe Dayan Center of Middle Eastern Studies at Tel Aviv University. Thank you, Professor Rabi, for joining us. And a member of Knesset of the Israeli Parliament of the Labour Party, member of Knesset Arel Margalit, member of Knesset. Thank you for joining us. Professor Rabi, I want to start with you. Of conflicting reports now, we have an answer, although one will say, Hamas can say, it's not us, it's Islamic Jihad, someone else. Or are they under control of the Gaza Strip completely?
Well, I mean, first of all, it is under control, and if that actually firing is really there, actually Hamas has decided actually to violate the ceasefire or just to renew actually firing as well. And again, what we have here is kind of an byproduct of the negotiating table. We have to understand actually where Hamas started from. His point of departure was kind of a strategic and economic predicament. They would like to have kind of a thing that would change the rules of the games. This naval base or whatever. Actually, for Egyptians, it is a pie in the sky. They are not going actually to provide that kind of a thing in a million years. And basically what Egypt is playing is kind of a tough game because Israel is the one actually to address the, let us say, the attack coming from Hamas. And we are just in the same round. Basically, what we have to understand now is that Hamas has nothing to lose. Because basically, in the long run or medium term, without getting kind of a gateway to the outer world, they are not going to survive. Rafah crossing is not enough because it is in the hand of Sisi, and the guy despises Hamas, and we know definitely that Egypt actually looks at Hamas as kind of a byproduct of Muslim Brothers.
But we also know that the delegation to Cairo was a very unprecedented delegation in terms of the Palestinians. It was a mix. It wasn't only Hamas. It was led by Fatah. It was had other parties. Aren't those parties also pressuring Hamas accept the extension of the ceasefire because you do have something to lose?
I agree. I mean, yes, I agree with you. But all the more reason why Hamas, actually, while looking at what's going on in Cairo, what he has in mind is kind of a troika of Abu Mazen, Israel, and Sisi, who would like to marginalize Hamas via Rafah crossing and in the long run. And basically, this is why Hamas is coming up with those high demands in order to make it up to itself and talk to the people in Gaza, actually explaining them why it was worth actually fighting Israel. By the way, what Hamas is counting on also is 2 main things, additional things. First of all, counting on what I call support coming from the international public opinion. And the second thing, he doesn't believe yet that Israel is willing and ready to come up with kind of a full-scale attack that would demolish Hamas' position in Gaza. So basically, they still view Israel inside the box of what is expected. And of course, Israel has to decide how to go on. What we know is that Israel is going to retaliate. To what extent, we'll have to wait and see.
Well, we'll ask now a member of Knesset, Margalita. We'll start with you. Right before that, we do want to get an update from Ashkelon. Yoav Borovich, our I-24 News correspondent, you're there. Give us the latest from Ashkelon. Code red in the city just a few minutes ago.
Good morning, Yael. Yes, really, 2 minutes ago, missile alert here in Ashkelon. We heard the interception really 10 seconds after you heard the siren, you heard the interception. People running here inside. We're here in the city center, near City Hall is behind us. Every Friday morning, packed with people. Today, very empty. People were concerned, and they were right, because 8:02, missile alert, already rockets. This city received 233 rockets throughout Protective Edge. 38 rockets were intercepted by Iron Dome. One person was severely injured in the city. 2 soldiers of the city died. And Protective Edge, but really Ashkelon is really the epicenter of the activity here, of the rockets launched towards Israel in the southern end. Definitely in terms of the cities, it's a city that suffered the most, that received the most rockets. And people here are really concerned. I talked to a woman here, she goes to nursing school in Barzilai. She said for 1 month there was no school. She has a 2-year-old daughter, no activities for the children. Really, people are living a very, very difficult everyday life with a lot of fear. The last 3 days obviously was quiet, but the minute that the ceasefire is over, there's rockets towards the city. We'll be here following all developments.
Yoav Borovich, our I-24 news correspondent there in Ashkelon. Thank you for that update. Member of Knesset Margalit, Israel has said considerably well enough this past week that it will be retaliating to any kind of rocket firing. Do you believe that this is going to open another operation, or we'll see limited attacks now?
Well, I think, Hamas was facing a blockade of Israel, Egypt, and the Palestinian Authority, and to some extent this shows frustration. I think that Israel is absolutely ready for the next stage of the operation. Israel chose to halt the operation and to go to negotiations. And I think we should keep our cool. In other words, I think that a terrorist organization can operate in ways which are they show this, they show that. Israel keeps its cool. The Hamas is not going to get a port at this stage. I think Israel was forthcoming in a few things that it did provide. And I think Israel is ready for the next stage of the operation. As you can remember, Israel in the beginning accepted a ceasefire twice before it actually went in. So I think Israel's ready. It's ready with the plans for the next phase of the operation. At this stage, whether we're going to go ahead and move to the next phase, we'll have to see. It really depends on the way that the ceasefire is kept or not.
Some of the criticism directed towards the government during this time was why doesn't Israel support or strengthen the moderates in the region, the moderates that were also in Cairo? Mahmoud Abbas himself wasn't in Cairo, but his representatives were. Is this not the time, also as opposition in the government, to call out and tell Prime Minister Netanyahu, go speak to Mahmoud Abbas? He's the one that can perhaps take control of the situation.
I think that Israel is supporting the moderate forces in the region, and I think that what's happening in Iraq, there's a clear understanding that there's the moderate states, which Israel is part of them, and there's the extreme organizations of Hamas, of Daesh, of others in the Middle East. So Israel is working very closely with Egypt. It's working very closely with Jordan and with the Arab states like Saudi Arabia and others, and it's ready to deal with Gaza. And oddly enough, the way that the Palestinians will achieve the most in Gaza, it needs to be understood, is by peaceful means and not by fire. Now, Israel is willing to bring the Palestinian Authority into the equation in Gaza. Israel is giving sort of a green light to that new package. It wants the international community to be involved as well, but it looks to a way of starting to build Gaza above ground for the civilians rather than the way to build Gaza underground for the militants.
Is the Labour Party still going to unequivocally back this government and this operation, as we've seen throughout the last 32 days?
So I think that, look, if the operation goes to its next step, some of us in the Labour Party thought that the means should be even harsher in terms of going after the Hamas leadership. I mean, some of us think that they should be under a lot of pressure. I'm just not sure we are going to the next phase of the operation, and I'm not sure we should be impressed with 1 or 2 rockets of people that are very frustrated.
You called it this week a missed opportunity. There's a feeling of a missed opportunity, that there wasn't a decisive victory.
Well, I think we need to be careful. I come from the Golani Brigade, from the Special Forces of Golani, and my friends and other people that were fighting in different parts felt like they should be doing the next thing. It doesn't mean that it's an all-out occupation of Gaza. Nobody wants that. But we felt like the pressure on the leadership of Hamas should have been a bit greater, and that together with the negotiations, maybe the way to dismantle and to demilitarize Gaza would have been a better path. But right now we're all united to see what's the next phase of the operation. However, where the criticism could come in of the opposition is, where does Israel go on the negotiations front, both in Gaza, because we think there needs to be carrots and not just sticks. There needs to be an economic plan, much like we did in the West Bank after there were suicide bombers there. You need to see that a lot of the economic and technology and investments that were going on gave people a different chance, not just a different threat. That's one. And the second thing is, are we going to use the new alliance in the Middle East for a different order, with Egypt, with Jordan, with the Palestinian Authority, with the moderate states, and is it time to deal with some of the broader question if that alliance is strong? And I think that the thing that Israelis feel today, that there are Arab states that they can trust, and that's a new phenomena coming out of this operation.
Professor Aubrey, what member of Knesset Margalit is saying is actually echoing what Netanyahu said in one of his statements, saying that we're in a time of this new regional unity. Netanyahu didn't spell out which states are with us, and he didn't also mention Mahmoud Abbas. Is Israel in this state of regional unity, or is the Middle East is a shaky place? Sisi just came up to power last year as Muslim Brotherhood.
Basically, I agree that there are deep changes in the political chessboard, geopolitical chessboard, and Israel should capitalize on that. But I wouldn't exaggerate on that. Actually, we have wide common denominator with states like Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Egypt. All of them are anti-Muslim brothers. All of them are anti-Iranian. So basically, this provides kind of a wide common denominator. But at the same time, each state has its own actually set of interests. Basically, what Israel should do is just be very, very clever and wise in order to just build up or tailor a kind of a pact, kind of a deal that would address some of the basic concerns of Israel. As for Mahmoud Abbas, I don't think that he can take it all. I don't think that he is able, actually, to just politically. I mean, he is going through kind of a very, very, I would say, eroded legitimacy when it comes to the Palestinian street.
Is it also because of Israel's handling of the situation?
Definitely, he is being considered as an Israeli puppet or an Egyptian puppet. When it comes to the Arab discourse, not the Israeli discourse, Israel actually makes it simple because they think that Abu Mazen or Mahmoud Abbas could actually be one-on-one, and that's just the ultimate alternative. It's not there. I thus think that Israel could go halfway for Abu Mazen and for Hamas. This is kind of an opportunity Israel should consider. Because if we are going to humiliate Hamas, we're going to have Hamas is practicing his politics of survival. They have nothing to lose.
Right.
So basically, if Israel is going back to Gaza, this is kind of a real imbroglio. And I think that Israel should just take one out of two. Going into Gaza could be ended up in the demolishing of Hamas, and Israel is responsible for taking care of Gaza. Maybe this is what we should do. But we have to think thoroughly, because it's either or. We can't use this quiet will be answered by quiet. This is not the language Hamas could actually realize or understand. So basically, Israel is at the crossroads. The thing is that in all this united front or moderate front, the only party that should actually fight Hamas or get into battle with Hamas is Israel. Not Jordan, not Saudi Arabia, not Egypt. And I'm not actually belittling the very, very important role Egypt had in Saudi Arabia, for example, to belittle Qatar or to prevent Qatar from getting to the negotiating table. So there are things Israel should do. But all in all, this is kind of a crossroads, and Israel should decide not conflict management. Maybe it's time for us to come up with a strategy that is being gleaned from what I call conflict resolution.
But can it be a political strategy and not a military strategy in your eyes?
I think yes, because if we would like to buy some more time, providing that we know that this lull is just kind of a temporal thing and we're going to get another round, maybe it's time for us actually to consider something that Hamas could live with. Of course, not a naval base, but something that Hamas could live with. And this is something that we have to do with Egypt, with the international scene. It is not actually for Israel alone to come up with kind of a solution that would satisfy, for the time being, Hamas. Basically, I think it's a very delicate and sensitive moment, and I think that Israel should thoroughly actually how to proceed from here.
Maybe the biggest arm of of Israel is the United States has been pretty absent from the Cairo talks as far as we know in the media. Obviously, they are going to be pulling the strings behind the scenes. Is it because, do you believe that the Americans are giving the Egyptians the leading role in order to empower them in the region?
Well, I think that the United States is sort of a giant in retreat, as we said before, and this is how it is being taken or perceived by many in the Middle East. I think, though, that the United States is able and maybe willing to invest some more effort when it comes to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. It is high time for America and Egypt just to settle some of the differences that they had before. But I guess that when we hear about what's going on in Iraq, when we hear what's going about Syria, I think that this is a new geopolitical chessboard. We have failed states, and Israel should see and think in one way. If we are not going to live behind the message that Israel shouldn't be dealt with in the medium term, actually organizations like Daesh, Hezbollah, and others might actually use the same trick against Israel. So because we have a changing phenomenon, a changing geopolitical chessboard, we have to think also about the messages that should be sent here and there.
Member Knesset Margalit, when you look at the U.S.-Israeli relations, not only the past month, but the past year, crumbling is one word that comes to mind. Has the Israeli government acted irresponsibly with the United States in the past month? We were hearing, of course, reports from the Kerry Netanyahu personal relationship that is deteriorating. What do you think?
Well, clearly the premise needs to remain that the U.S. is Israel's strongest ally. And in this region as well, working with Egypt, working with the Palestinian Authority and the other moderate states, the U.S. is key to the process. Israel has no interest in putting the U.S. in the foreground. It wants to put it in the front. And so anything that we do in terms of misunderstanding, I think there were a few mistakes that were made. I think there were misunderstandings. But right now, the interest of Israel and the United States, quite frankly, in my mind, is to get back very closely aligned in the negotiations process.
But was it not blown to pieces after the 9-month shuttle diplomacy that the U.S. Secretary of State of Kerry came to the region repeatedly, and that was the premise really to the operation. We weren't in good relations with Mahmoud Abbas, we weren't in good relations with the United States, and now we're quote unquote stuck with the Egyptians.
My criticism of the Prime Minister and my party's criticism is that we need to be much more proactive on the international scene. We need to take initiatives, and this is the time to take a specific initiative because we didn't have that problem before on the table. And so Israel needs to have two hands, one holding a stick, a big one, unfortunately, when it comes to Hamas. I think that if the next part of the operation needs to be initiated, then the Hamas leadership needs to be under personal attack. One. On the other hand, if the negotiations are going to be continuing, then Israel, together with the Palestinian Authority and the Egyptians, should come up with a vision in which you do build and rebuild Gaza without giving the crossings and the cement and the steel to the Hamas. And so you want a school? Yes, but not to the Hamas because we want the school not to have a basement with ammunition. You want a hospital? Yes, because we don't want it to be a bunker. You want the Erez crossing to come back for free passage. You're talking about a port, but Israel actually had, together with the Palestinians, the Erez crossing with fresh goods. You want this to be there. You want an industrial zone because the unemployment rate in Gaza is so high? Yes, but not to the Hamas, to the Palestinian Authority, the Egyptians, and the Europeans. You want that? That's fine. But the Hamas and the others need to understand that any way to extract from Israel a win-win situation is not through force, but it's through negotiations. And the Israelis are ready to give the Gazans, not the Hamas, but the Gazans and the Palestinians, a new chapter together with the international community.
But Professor Rabi, is this viable to give the Gazans and not the Hamas?
I don't think so. Hamas is controlling Gaza all over the place. this is a mass movement. And they look, I mean, and being perceived by most of Gazans, very authentic leaders. They came from within. Actually, they are part and parcel of the conflict. And I am afraid that if we would like to have kind of a prosperous Gaza in the future, it should be and would be without Hamas. Basically, Hamas is sacrificing Gazans for its politics of survival.
Right.
The equation is pretty clear. And I think that all those who adhere to kind of a political process with peace in the end of the day, they should actually support the notion of, at a certain stage, go for Hamas, because Hamas is an ultimate obstacle to every actually...
But there's actually, I think there's actually a little bit of a different option. If there's a pressure on Hamas, and the Palestinian Authority is the front, we understand that Hamas still holds most of the power. But I think there could be a process like you had in the West Bank, to take those people from underground to above ground, put the administrators that maybe belonged at some point to Hamas to be part of the administration where the Palestinian Authority is in the front, and start administrating civilian rebuilding of Gaza. That is Israel's most strongest message. And that's the only way that Hamas will have to stay in Gaza and not to be attacked directly by Israel.
I agree with that. This is what I call the halfway. Halfway Abu Mazen, halfway Hamas. It is not to solve the problem. It's just to buy some more time until the next round. I really think that this is also an option, because we are going to marginalize Hamas one way or the other.
Exactly.
But basically, I think that Hamas in nature is kind of a movement that is being gleaned or built up on the basis of muqawama. And this is not a slogan. This is part of the DNA of Hamas. So sooner or later, he will get back to fighting Israel, because it has to do with the way Hamas was built up and the way Hamas actually takes reality. Basically, I think that this is something we should think of in order to have kind of a relative lull. Yes, I accept that. But if we would like to have a real
right.
different future when it comes to Gaza, Palestinian, Israeli conflict, I think that in the end of the day, Hamas should be out of the picture, politically speaking,
That's right.
not necessarily actually
That's right.
socially or
And that might not be up to Israel to decide that. That might have to stay with
That is the
Abbas.
problem.
With me now is I-24 News correspondent Michal Divon. You're on the Israeli-Gaza border this morning, as you have been in the past 32 days. What is different this morning, or is it more of the same?
Hi, Yael. So the feeling of calm has expired together with the ceasefire. Already at 4 a.m. there were alarms sounding in the Eshkol Regional Council, with 2 rockets exploding in open areas. In this past hour, we've been hearing alarms throughout the Gaza envelope. It's important to note that at this time, the rockets are being focused on the areas closest to the Gaza border. This could be perhaps a sign of wanting to continue with the negotiations, because the rockets are not being launched well into Israel. At the moment, the Home Front Command and the Eshkol and the rest of the regional councils in the Gaza envelope are guiding citizens and residents to stay within 15 seconds of shelters. Yesterday, business was as usual, and today it seems that a high alert is being placed back in this area.
Michal Divon, I-24 News correspondent there. Thank you for joining us. Member Knesset Margalit, I'm just getting now updates from different ministers in the government, calling now, of course, there was 5 rockets that were fired towards Israel. 1 was intercepted over Ashkelon, calling now on IDF forces to go in and topple the Hamas regime once and for all. Obviously, this is rhetoric that we have heard throughout. We heard it from our foreign minister. We heard it from members of the right-wing parties. Now, of course, they are going to have this political capital to actually, take with them after the operation as well, and that will see a right-wing, more right-wing leadership in Israel.
You know, when these situations emerge, one needs to keep his cool. And I think that Israel right now, there's a few rockets that were fired into open spaces, and the situation is unclear. In my mind, it needs to be dealt with calm, because what it shows is a lot of pressure from the Hamas side, I don't think they're going to the next phase of the operation. Israel is absolutely ready to protect its citizens. Israel is absolutely ready to go to the next phase. It doesn't mean an all-out occupation of Gaza, but it does mean the kind of operation that this time is not going to stay within the 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers of the tunnels, but it's going to go deeper into the Hamas leadership, and it's going to put them under attack. Israel's ready to do this. The international community has asked Israel, together with the Egyptians, together with the Palestinian Authority, to try and come up with negotiations that would settle the situation. Israel needs to keep its forces on the border, which it does. It needs to keep its air force ready, which it is. And Israel has a clear plan for the next phase of the operation. I do think, though, that right now, from what I'm hearing from the Egyptians and what I'm hearing from the what is going on in Cairo, that the negotiations are probably going to go on. I'm not seeing an all-out attack, and I'm not seeing an all-out going to the next phase of the operation. If there is a next phase, Israel has the next plan.
But are you worried about public opinion? Public opinion throughout this operation has been overwhelmingly in support of the continuation of the operation. Are you worried that this will politically damage parts of the left wing, parts of the center of Israel?
On the contrary. I think that the opposition, led by the Labour Party, we have to remember, Labour Party is not, Labour Party had Rabin, which was the biggest military general, Moshe Dayan. Labour Party comes from a tradition of being very supportive of the army being very resilient and very strong and very determined. So the Labour Party comes from a whole tradition of being very operationally minded. On the other hand, right now, being supportive of the government was important because the government took step by step to get into the operation. If Israel is going to go to the next level, we are going to be supportive if it's going to be necessary. If the negotiations continue, the Labour Party and the opposition is going to demand to use more imagination, more creativity, more forthcoming measures, not with Hamas, with the Palestinian Authority and the Egyptians, so that Gaza could be normalized, or we could attempt to have a different partner in Gaza by giving the different partner a chance.
Member of Knesset Aral Margalit from the Labour Party, thank you for joining us this morning. Professor Uzi Rabi, thank you for being with us. We're going to go for a quick break and we'll be back with more of this I-24 News Morning Edition special broadcast this morning, day 32 of Operation Protective Edge. Welcome back to I-24 News Morning Edition. This is day 32 of the Operation Protective Edge. An 8 a.m. ceasefire was due to be extended this morning. It was not. 5 rockets were fired towards Ashkelon early 8:02 this morning. 1 was intercepted over the southern city, and we're hearing now that there are code red sirens in the Eshkol Regional Council. That, of course, is the area next to the Gaza Strip. With me now in studio is Nadav Perry, Channel 10's political correspondent. Hi, Nadav. Thank you for joining us. And Amir Oren, the senior defense correspondent of Haaretz. Amir, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Yael. I hope you had a nice 3-day break.
3-day break, and as you predicted, I will give you the credit. The rockets are continuing into Israel, meaning the Israeli military and the Israeli political leadership has said repeatedly that it will be retaliating. Do we know of any kind of plans of the moment to retaliate?
What must be said, first of all, is that these are not any rogue elements. Last night, when there were deliberations in the Israeli High Command, it was established, first of all, that there is a steady link between the Palestinian delegation in Cairo and the Hamas underground leadership, and that if they are going to break the ceasefire, as we see that they have done, it will be on direct instructions and in coordination between Gaza and Cairo. So first of all, it is an intentional move on the part of Hamas. The Israelis have readied several options. They will definitely retaliate in one fashion or another because they must they promised the residents of the southern villages that they can come back. The Homefront Command have already issued instructions that everything is back to normal. Now they had
They
to
call
take
back residents to come back to their communities.
Yes, they have to stay 15 seconds from shelters. So the Israeli government, and Nadav will obviously know more about it, is now going to be under political assault if it doesn't do anything.
We're seeing now live pictures from the Gaza border. We're seeing tanks or coming in. I don't know if they're going to go into the actual strip, but we are seeing movement along the Israeli-Gaza border. These are live pictures now from that area. With us on the phone now is the former Israeli ambassador to Egypt, Ambassador Yitzhak Levanon. Ambassador Levanon, we've been speaking much during this operation, and obviously we were not too hopeful for this three-day ceasefire. What does this mean in terms of the Egyptians? Were they unable to convince Hamas, as they perhaps thought they would be able to extend the ceasefire?
Well, first of all, good morning.
Good morning.
And I hope that we will have, again, this kind of calm and tranquility again. Look, from what I do understand is that the Egyptians had some success with part of the Palestinian delegation, the one who belongs to the Palestinian Authority, and less with the military wing of Hamas, which decided to violate the ceasefire. I think that Hamas is doing a strategic mistake, but he would like at least to signal to everybody that he is credible. Whenever he said that he is going to shoot after 8 o'clock, and he do that, I think that he is increasing his credibility while he is discussing in Cairo. The second point, I think that there is a situation which is untenable and unacceptable, that there is no declared, and I'm putting the emphasis on the word declared because it will be accepted by all parties of a ceasefire, and to leave it as such, that there is no shooting, because we will be, hostages of Hamas. Whenever he will decide to shoot, he will shoot, and when he would like to stop the shooting, he will do it. Therefore, I believe that the Egyptians are putting extra effort now in order to convince the military wing, with the help of the other sides of the delegation, that, look, this is not the way to handle the situation, because we will have to discuss other issues. And only when you will have a common, decided, accepted ceasefire, like we had the last 72 hours, we can move on the political field. So I think, and I'm expecting that the Egyptians probably will succeed in the coming few hours.
And diplomatically speaking, does Israel have the international credit now to retaliate with full force? Israel has said from the beginning that if the ceasefire is broken, it will be retaliating. But in terms of international credit, in terms of the pressure that the international community will be putting on for ceasefire, can Israel now retaliate with full military force?
Well, first of all, I think that we have all the justification, because we were in a period of a ceasefire for 72 hours. We send delegations to Cairo. I think that Hamas now is in a collision course, not only with us, is with Egypt, with the rest of the delegation, and with the United States and the international community, because he was the one who decided to stop the ceasefire. I think that we had, and this is the moment, that the Israeli officials, whether it will be from the Prime Minister's office or from the Foreign Ministry, to go out and to travel all over Europe and the United States and to explain what the efforts Israel is doing in order to avoid any further escalation. And this is part of the job that we have to do it now, and this will increase the support when we will have it in the public opinion.
Ambassador Levanon, quickly, Hamas's demands were quite along, different demands. Some were more viable than others. Some were also things that Israel couldn't accept from the beginning, building a seaport, building an airport, and so forth. What demands from Hamas would be acceptable both to the Egyptians and perhaps also to Israel?
Hamas should understand that after the round of violence, he cannot dictate his conditions. He has to be reasonable. The question of a seaport and an airport, this doesn't belong to this ceasefire cycle. It belongs to the talks about the final settlement and the peace between us and the Palestinians. So he will have to be reasonable. If he will not be reasonable, I think that there are ways to get him to that situation.
Ambassador Itzhak Levanon, the former Israeli ambassador to Egypt, thank you for joining us this morning. Nadav, I want to continue with you. This was only a ticking clock, I would say, until the right-wing ministers in the government would use this, of course, for their own political capital, but also to speak to the public opinion, which has been overwhelmingly supportive. Uri Ariel this morning is already saying we have to go in and topple Hamas once and for all.
According to Uri Ariel, we should have gone into Gaza 2 weeks ago. So the right-wing ministers are doing their thing, and no one is expecting for them not to call for retaliation and for a severe response from the Israeli government. But I think that Netanyahu has proved during the last several weeks that he has a consistent policy, or trying to run a consistent policy without giving those background sounds any meaning. Therefore, I think he will try to do his very best in order to avoid any escalation which will be uncontrollable. There is no doubt that Hamas is now, as we're speaking here, is dragging us back to the field, back to Gaza, and there will be some kind of retaliation. I guess it will be some airstrikes, but as long as Netanyahu's decision, he won't have any interest to do what he hasn't done during the last months, and it's to go to overall operation to reoccupy Gaza Strip. He didn't want this to happen 2 weeks ago. He didn't want this to happen a week ago, and he doesn't want it to happen right now.
But still, 87%, this is a poll that Channel 10 had did in the middle of the operation, showed that 87% of the population, maybe unprecedented numbers in terms of military operations, were backing the government. Netanyahu's popularity otherwise has seen a decrease. Is this because of these right-wing ministers that have outspoken, perhaps?
I think Netanyahu earned a lot of points among people in the center, even in the left, that gave him the credit for not going to such an escalation and not going to reoccupying Gaza and so on. So he did earn some points, not in his political base, rather than in the other camp, in the centre-left camp. When it comes to his constituency, his natural constituency, here we see among right voters a great section of disappointment, a great section of people who do want to see further actions by the Israeli military. And then, while we're seeing the sights from the areas surrounding Gaza, there is a situation, we will see what those speakers in the right wing wish to see, and it's a very massive operation by the IDF.
Meaning we might see, of course, politically speaking, new leaders on the right wing emerging, Bennett, Lieberman, and so forth?
Look, as far as the right wing concerned, we should have done much more than we did in the last several weeks. Still, to call the shot right now, we're like 40 minutes after 8, and to tell who is going to earn from the old new situation, right, and who is going to earn some points, and who is going to make some
political gains and so forth.
It is too soon to tell. It is definitely too soon to tell right now.
Amir?
Today is August the 8th, and veterans of Israel's wars well remember that this was the day that the ceasefire was established during the war of attrition in 1970 between Israel and Egypt. And Israel is in a sort of a war of attrition right now. And
something that Netanyahu was desperately trying to avoid.
Yes, there was a collective sigh of relief a few days ago when the campaign seemed to be over. And people do not want to be dragged back into this roller coaster. A minute ago or so, the first shell has already landed inside a village in the Eshkol Regional Council. There have been no casualties, but it was a hit inside, so the government cannot ignore the situation. Obviously, the military, as well as the government, would not want to send combat troops again in a ground action. but action from the air against the rockets or the mortar shells is to be expected.
We have to remember also that to launch now a new ground offensive in Gaza Strip will take some time, because the reserves are back in their house and the forces are not there already. So it will take some time to collect them all together, to bring them back to the point they used to be, to bring back all the heavy stuff.
So if they want to do heavy stuff, but if there was to be a lightning strike by special forces, helicopter-borne or...
Yes,
or,
I'm talking about the ground offensive. If they're going to launch another ground offensive, it will take some time.
But why would they, and why should they, if the tunnels are no longer there? The whole rationale had to do with the tunnels. Israel paid with 64 soldiers killed, a very heavy price.
Not only that, the IDF has, since they left the Gaza Strip, has showcased its military achievements, saying we achieved these 32 tunnels, we achieved maybe a substantial amount of rocket firing and so forth. Is this now, obviously Hamas is using it as a game or a stick against Israel. Is there much more to do in terms of military achievements?
There is much more to do, but it will cost much more, both in time, in staying power, in being stuck in Gaza when danger could lurk up in the north. Israel cannot keep all of its regular brigades down south in one particular sector when it has 360 degrees of threats around it. So it is better for Israel to disengage on the ground and perhaps hit back from the air.
Yes, but then again, we have to remember there is a perception led by the Foreign Minister Lieberman, but held by a lot of other people, which say that in order to dismantle Hamas, in order to stop this drill of rockets, you have to reoccupy the land. You have to control the soil. And unfortunately, it seems like this continuation of rocket launching towards Israel, and now we're getting updates, more and more updates about more and more shooting. So unfortunately, it seems this perception is going to be backed by a lot of other people that didn't like this option very much and do not like this option very much, but see that.
But military professionals.
Nothing else is do the work.
Military professionals, including those who retired from the military and went into politics, well remember that the 18 years Israel spent in Lebanon did not stop Hezbollah. First,
but those are voices that perhaps even in the opposition we're not hearing, in the government.
No, Bogi Ya'alon, the defense minister, is part of this generation. And obviously, even if you look at Eastern Jerusalem, where you had a couple of terror attacks, this is part of Israel. Israel has annexed Jerusalem, and it didn't stop terrorists from using a bulldozer or a knife or a gun to commit terror acts. So Lieberman's proposals are naive, not to say childish. Israel has been through these cycles time and again in the last 66 years, and it is well advised not to follow Lieberman's suggestions.
Netanyahu's security cabinet throughout went through shaky periods and other periods of unity. Where is it now today? We started off, of course, with a very more of a left wing within the security cabinet with Livni and so forth.
I think the mainstream inside the cabinet is with Netanyahu. As long as you try to examine it, you see that you have Netanyahu and Bogi Ya'alon. You can separate them. They're just one unit during the whole operation. The
also
prime minister, politically and professionally. During the time of this operation, you couldn't put any fly between them. There is no gap. They're just one unit. So you have the prime minister, you have the defense minister, you do have with them Tzipi Livni, you do have with them Yair Lapid. This is like the moderate section in the cabinet, and usually with them you have Gilad Erdan. He has very good ties with the prime minister. You do have the observers in the cabinet, Steinitz and Perry, that are going with the mainstream. What left what left you is just Lieberman and Bennett. So they are very prominent in their they have a prominent voice.
But it is not enough, because should the prime minister find himself in the minority, he will go to the full cabinet. He will go to the plenary.
I'm not sure whether the full cabinet will give him the back he needs, because the situation in the full cabinet, in the government, is even more fragile when it comes to Netanyahu's position. So I don't think
off in the security
it is better for him in the security cabinet. And Amir knows, and we have to remember the fact that usually prime ministers, every prime minister, they own a majority in the security cabinet. They can pass the decisions they want. So Netanyahu won't be dragged into a situation he doesn't want to be dragged to, but still it is a very fragile.
But in an extreme situation, could Netanyahu threaten resignation, bringing down the government, calling new elections, or even not only threatening, but go ahead and do it?
In order for Netanyahu to resign, I think you should have a much bigger war than we're seeing right now. So let's hope we won't get into there.
We're going to get a quick update now from Michal Divon, our I-24 news correspondent. You're on the Israeli-Gaza border this morning. Not a quiet border since the ceasefire ended 47 minutes ago.
That's right, Yael. While there's no official statement coming from Cairo, another barrage of rockets hits the south of Israel. We've heard of a direct hit in one of the communities here in Eshkol. Now, where I'm standing at the moment, we're 2 kilometers away from the northern Gaza Strip. You can see in the distance Bet Hanun, Bet Lahia. We've seen some of the activity of the launches, and we have also witnessed a small mushroom cloud of smoke. We're unsure if it's a failed launch or, in fact, a retaliation. We're also seeing some of the tanks moving and repositioning themselves here along the Gaza border. These past 3 days, there has been a military buffer zone within 5 kilometers of the border, but it seems like positions are once again shifting as this morning the firing is continuing and the residents of the south are again asked to remain 15 seconds within shelters.
Michal Divon, our I-24 news correspondent there. Thank you for joining us. You will, of course, be updating us throughout the day. Right before the ceasefire ended, both Nadav and Amir, Netanyahu...
It was 45 minutes ago.
45 minutes ago.
It wasn't so
Not
far,
so long ago.
No.
But Netanyahu did continue on his PR campaign to the world, to the international community. This is an interview that he gave last night to Sean Hannity of Fox News. Let's take a look.
You know, I think we're in a terrible conflict with a terrible enemy. And we regret, I personally regret, and the people of Israel regret, every civilian casualty that we have. Israel does not target civilians, it targets the terrorists. But here's what these terrorists are doing. Terrorists like Al-Qaeda and like Hezbollah and like ISIS and like Boko Haram, Hamas is no different. They have absolutely no regard for civilians. So the first thing they do is they target our civilians. They fired 3,500 rockets into our cities, covering 80% of our population. Just imagine 250 million Americans who have to be on alert to get into bomb shelters against incoming rockets into American cities. You have 90 seconds at most to go into a bomb shelter. That's the first thing they do. They target civilians. Then they dig terror tunnels into our territory so they can send death squads to kill our children, our citizens, and kidnap our people. Imagine that, okay? So what would you do in the United States or in any country that is now looking at us? What would you say to your government?
Amir?
Netanyahu's case, or in this case, Israel's case, this time they are inseparable. Netanyahu's case is greatly helped by the misery elsewhere, including in Iraq, where the U.S. has airdropped water and meals ready to eat early this morning. However, the U.S. position regarding airstrikes in Iraq brings to mind Israel's policy in Gaza, because the U.S. has ordered its Air Force and Navy fighters to fire on ISIS convoys. But what if these convoys also hold women and children? Will the U.S. strike convoys which are threatening the Yazidi minority with genocide if the commanders and the president know that women and children of the ISIS fighters are with them and could be hurt?
Can you imagine the Israeli condemnation if they will hurt any civilians, the Americans?
Well, maybe not condemnation, but at least a very satisfactory smile.
Yes, I guess.
Not only a smile, he most likely will be using it in his further statements and so forth. We did see 2 days ago him speaking to the foreign press, using videos and so forth to convince the world. Is this because he understands that the world is not really with Israel, as perhaps he's trying to show?
Absolutely. While seeing the horrific sights from Gaza, and we know that news corporations around the world are showing what happened there and showing the misery and the victims, and so. Of course, the international public opinion is with the Palestinians because the situation in Gaza is much more difficult than the situation here, we have to admit. But here we're seeing another time in which Israel earns points thanks to Hamas. It happens the first time when Hamas didn't accept the Egyptian initiative. It happened the second time when Israel kept the humanitarian ceasefire,
right.
and Hamas broke it. And I think it will happen again, but it has no meaning.
But these are short-term,
it has just a short-term meaning. And after the Israeli retaliation, after the first civilians victims in Gaza, it is all over.
But Yael, it is a PR war, but the term has different meanings. For Israel, it's public relations. For Hamas, it's Palestinian rockets. That's PR for them. And Hamas is not that interested in global prestige or in scoring points.
Israel does.
Israel does. And the world says to Israel, yes, you are justified in fighting to protect your citizens, but we don't like the means you are using.
Right.
The consequences are terrible. We don't really care how you go about it, but find another method.
But
By the way, just forgive me, but we're hearing about thousands of Palestinians in Gaza Strip that are trying to escape from their homes right now in order to avoid the Israeli retaliation, which is about to happen any minute now.
They've been warned.
Yes.
They've been warned.
They don't have to be in war. They
know the drill.
They just know how it works. So I guess that's why they are escaping.
There was no leak here. They simply know the score.
They simply know. The question is, of course, though, if Netanyahu is his talking points now tiring the international community? Is it talking points that tiring international leaders? That
I guess Sean Hannity has as much time to hear Prime Minister as he wants, but.
Couldn't he have said throughout the war, he talked about a regional unity, but he never mentioned, of course, Mahmoud Abbas by name. He talked, only when he's confronted with the question, what kind of role do you see the PA taking, does he actually address it?
Yes, I think by a large part of the international media, Netanyahu was like an old and tiring player. They know what he's going to say. They know how he's going to explain it. They know his way of acting. So I think it happens to be very frustrating to be Israeli speaker in the international media right now, because there is a great amount of suspicion from the international media towards Israel, towards the Israeli formal speakers, and of course towards the Prime Minister.
It's really frustrating, and one wouldn't want to admit it, but Hamas won diplomatically this round by virtue of President Obama announcing that the isolation of Gaza must stop. Now, the haggling in Cairo is over. What does that end for the isolation mean? Will the siege be lifted wholly or partially, a seaport, an airport? These are secondary matters. But in that
because of those secondary matters, the ceasefire is broke. So
yes, so yes, of course, Hamas is trying to prod Israel and the U.S. and the others to come to terms.
And then we're seeing now the economy minister, Naftali Bennett, is calling now on Israel to return its delegation from Cairo back to Israel, to bring them back. There's nothing to talk about.
They'll be back for the Shabbat anyway.
I wouldn't bet on it.
Saying that the reaction must be harsh. Obviously, as we said, it's only now, Nadav, 56 minutes after the ceasefire came into effect, meaning the political winds are just starting. It's going to be a stormy weekend.
We have to remember the parliament, the Knesset is in recess. There is not much politics right now in those hot August days, but as long as this shooting by the Palestinians is going to continue, as long as we are going to see right-wing politicians, and not just right-wing politicians calling for rough retaliate by the Israeli government. And it seems like 72 hours of quiet and peace are over by now.
Over.
But diplomacy and fighting are complementary. This is
only when they're both working at the same time.
Yes, but you know, Secretary Rogers many years ago, speaking about the war of attrition, said, "Stop shooting and start talking." You never really stop shooting while you are talking. You help the talking go along by shooting.
And this is, I think, the end of the day, what the purpose of this breaking of the ceasefire is, because Hamas knew 72 hours ago that he's being blamed for just now accepting the Egyptian initiative, and they want to prove, I think, that they did not accept the initiative then, and they do not accept this initiative right now.
And they have also their population to speak to. Nadav, thank you for joining us. Amir, thank you for joining us. We're going quickly to the I-24 News Desk for more headlines, and we'll be back. Welcome back to I-24 News Morning Edition. This is a special broadcast this morning, day 32 of Operation Protective Edge. 8 a.m. was due to be the beginning of the extension of the ceasefire. Hamas rejected it, firing at least 10 rockets into Israel, into the southern parts of Israel. One mortar shell did fall within a community in the Eshkol Regional Council. No injuries or damage was reported at this time. There was an interception above Ashkelon, the Israeli southern city, and we, of course, will be updating you throughout this broadcast on more. With me now in studio is Ali Waked, I-24 News senior Middle East analyst. Ali, thank you for being with us. Ido Waxman, a peace activist, thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
And Amir Oren, senior defense correspondent of Haaretz, thank you for staying. Ali, I do want to start with you. Thousands of Palestinians are fleeing now eastern Gaza. This is according to reports that we're getting from the Strip and from different reports online. Can you confirm it, and do we know if they have been warned of an attack?
No, they didn't. Only in the eastern parts of Gaza there are this displacement of the Palestinian population. Other places in Gaza, people are in the market, so people are not taking into serious this breaking of the ceasefire. I spoke in the break. I spoke with a source in Hamas that said that for the moment the shooting is around Gaza in the southern part of Israel, and that the state of Tel Aviv is not won't be, at least at the coming hours, part of this escalation between Israel and the Palestinians.
Meaning what? They don't want to by shooting only at southern Gaza. They're sending a different message. Had they been shooting at Tel Aviv?
Yes, they. And on the other hand, the spokesperson of Hamas, Sami Abu Zuhri, just declared that the Palestinian delegation will keep negotiating in Cairo, meaning that Hamas want to reach a political solution, but it wants the political solution that suits Hamas agenda, that suits Hamas need when it comes to face the Palestinian population. Hamas needs at any price a political achievement to go back to Gaza and present to the Palestinian population. And yesterday the spokesperson of the military wing of Hamas focused on the port of Gaza, which means that the Gazans, especially Hamas, do not want to be depending exclusively in Israel and in Egypt, having an access to the world.
But Hamas has most definitely heard the Prime Minister here and the IDF leadership saying they will be retaliating to any rocket attack following the 8 a.m. ceasefire. Are they not worried for their own population now in the Gaza Strip after the destruction that they've seen after the 29 days of war?
Well, I'm sorry to say that the population doesn't count in Hamas calculations. Hamas is fighting for its political life, for its political existence. In Hamas judgment, and also in the Egyptians, Hamas had important score in this war, and it is not capable to translate these achievements of the war into a political achievement, especially when they are facing a very firm Egyptian delegation that is not ready to hear anything besides security arrangement, beside the ceasefire, and Hamas is not sure that he will be part of the scene once they start talking the reconstruction of Gaza and the political future of Gaza.
The difference which Ali just made is very important, because one should see Hamas as the regime, and the regime in dictatorships doesn't really care about the population. Saddam Hussein didn't care about the Iraqis, and many of the Iraqis he didn't even consider authentic Iraqis. He couldn't care less. And so is the matter with Hamas. They are fighting for their survival as a regime and as a militia, and they really don't care what happens to the population. But they are also misreading Israel if they believe that what they are doing now is only a limited attack which will not cause Israel to retaliate heavily, because the Israeli authorities cannot be perceived domestically as having neglected the south and caring only when Tel Aviv is attacked.
At the same time, we spoke about in the last half hour of the political implications that Netanyahu is facing, and that does coincide with what you're saying. He has to domestically respond also to these attacks. At the same time, militarily speaking and internationally speaking, he doesn't want to go back into Gaza with ground troops.
Yes, well, earlier you graciously thanked me for staying. Well, the Israeli military thanked Netanyahu for not staying in Gaza. They have nothing to do on the ground there. They can have pinpoint strikes by special forces, obviously from the air, but the Israeli army does not want to be sucked into a terror attrition war by going into the very densely populated areas in Gaza, especially when you have an underground Gaza into which Hamas wants to drag the IDF.
Back into the IDF, into the tunnels that perhaps the IDF doesn't know about as well.
Well, no, these are defensive tunnels, a network inside Gaza. The attack penetrating tunnels have all been destroyed.
Ali, throughout the night, actually leading up to the 8 a.m. deadline, we heard conflicting reports whether Hamas will be accepting the ceasefire, depending on different Arab news publications. Are these conflicting reports reflective of perhaps a conflicted delegation?
The delegation is very conflicted because there are components who belong to the PLO and do not share Hamas agenda, and there is the Hamas, and I'm not sure that there is unanimity among the Hamas representatives in the delegations. We have the part of abroad, and we have the part of Gaza, and the part of Gaza is, of course, having more radical position. And of course, the most important are those who are not there, meaning the military representative of the Hamas military wing. So what is going on in Cairo can be described as a whole mess between the Palestinians themselves, between the Palestinians and the Egyptians, between the Egyptians and the Israelis, and Israel, I can say, it's stuck between Egypt and between Hamas. Israel, whose position is even a little bit more flexible than the Egyptian position, sees that the Egyptian mediator is not willing to give any concession to Hamas, while Israel was ready to give some concessions that don't have any impact over the strategic result of this round of negotiations. Some measures that will improve the day-to-day life of the Palestinians. The Egyptians were not ready even to touch these issues. The Egyptians want to talk for security arrangements in which Hamas are not part, and only then starting discussions about the future of Gaza, the reconstruction of Gaza, and also in this scenario, the Egyptians do not want that Hamas would be part of this future.
But is there anyone in the delegation, any group, any country that is going to now pressure Hamas and say, stop the rockets because you're going to be retaliated by the Israeli government?
Qatar is doing pressure over Hamas. Qatar informed, even the Israelis were informed of these efforts of Qatar to convince Hamas to extend the ceasefire. But we said at the beginning that Hamas doesn't take the population into calculation when it decides to go to the war. But if the war ends, Hamas will know that the very hard question of the population will start. Why was this round? if we are getting back to the same understanding of the 2012. This is why Hamas feels that it needs to bring some achievement to the population, a change, and this is why yesterday they focused on the port, a seaport, in order to try to have a third access to the world that doesn't depend exclusively with Israel and with Egypt.
And the Islamic Jihad and the armed wing of the Popular Resistance Committees both took responsibility for this morning's rocket fire. Is this...
This is another way of Hamas to say we are capable to escalate the situation.
Meaning we're mobilizing other groups to do it for us.
Yeah, and it is interesting because the Islamic Jihad yesterday was even his position was closer to the position of the other components of the Palestinian delegation. The Islamic Jihad was for the extension of 72 hours, but the Islamic Jihad doesn't have the same needs of Hamas. The popularity of the Islamic Jihad is not questioned like the popularity of Hamas.
But
the future.
This is a very transparent ploy in order to gain some deniability by Hamas, in order to keep its flexibility. But regarding what you said about Egypt's position, even though it is substantial, they really mean it, it is also tactically very effective, because eventually, if Egypt agrees to open some sort of a seaport or the Rafah crossing, then Hamas will know that it is in Egypt's hands to close it too. That in addition to what Israel wants, Egypt has a position of its own, and that Hamas is dependent on Egypt.
This is a problem, Amir, that Hamas doesn't feel that there is a mediation. They feel that they are talking to two parties and not one party, who is Israel. The Hamas feels that they are negotiating with the Israelis, with the Egyptians, and with parts of the Palestinian delegation of the PLO, and there is a whole crisis among the Palestinian delegation between the group that belongs to the PLO and between the Hamas.
We spoke earlier, Amir, about Economy Minister Naftali Bennett calling to recall a delegation back from Cairo. Should the delegation come back to Israel? Is this the end of diplomatic talks, or is it very fluid?
Well, one hopes that cooler heads will prevail. In all the earlier rounds of negotiations with Arab interlocutors, countries, not only organizations, when Israel withdrew its delegation, not only because of something which happened between the two parties, but for instance, when there was a negotiating round with Syria in 1996, and there was a terror act in Israel proper by Palestinians, by Hamas, Israel demanded that Syria condemn this act, and until it condemns it, the negotiations are broken. This was a tragic mistake. Talks should go on, contacts should never be broken, and hopefully there won't be this symbolic but empty gesture. And even if there is one, the talks would continue from Tel Aviv to Cairo.
Just a bit about the fabric of this Israeli delegation. We know, of course, of two IDF generals that are on the delegation, and of course Amos Gilad, who has very good relationships with the Egyptians before the conflict, of course. Will this impact perhaps the relationship between Israel and Egypt? Should Israel get up and leave?
Well, the day-to-day relationship is between the Egyptian security apparatus headed by General Tuhami and his counterparts in the various military and security branches of the Israeli government, and the two Israeli generals which are backing up the delegation, General Yoav Poli Mordechai, the coordinator in the territories, and General Nimrod Shefer, the planning branch chief, are moderates, are pragmatic. They have their personal contacts in the Arab world. This is a very positive development. It means that Israel means business, and that this is not just propaganda. Israel does want the population in Gaza to feel some sort of relief. Israel wants to take part in the reconstitution of the economy and society, and in Gaza, all it wants is security for its people.
I'm just going to update now our viewers that the Home Front Command has ordered to open up bomb shelters throughout the country, mostly now in the south. even city municipalities are now taking the initiative and opening up their bomb shelters in their cities, of course, because of the renewing of fire. Ali, on the Egyptian side, can the Egyptian side coerce or force or even just try to explain to the Israelis that they're still with their best interest and they should be staying in Cairo to continue the talks while
I think the
rockets are firing?
The Egyptians do not need to explain to the Israelis. The Israelis understand that it is in the interest of Israel, especially when we see that in the international community, the critics towards Israel, and we saw the Netanyahu last speech, which was like a kind of preparing his list of defense in front of the international court when he said that we were obliged to do this and to do so. So I don't think that the Israelis will withdraw from the negotiations. I think that the Israelis and the Egyptians should let the Palestinian delegation to understand that the security part of the negotiations is not the only and the main and the exclusive part of these negotiations. Hamas in the rooms is hearing demilitarization and ceasefire
By everyone, also by the Americans.
Yeah, of course, and they need with the Palestinian delegation to hear some political content in this negotiations, because Hamas, as the Palestinian delegation, the PLO, is trapped between both sides, and we are seeing the terminology of the Palestinian Authority accusing Israel for war crimes, threatening to go to the international court in La Haye to pursue Israel. So and the Egyptians hope that at the end of this round there will be serious negotiations, not only about Gaza but about the whole Palestinian issue between Israel and the PLO.
There are two opposing logics here. They are diametrically opposing. Israel wants a short and intense campaign, and the Arab side usually wants a very slow and even a low-burning stove sort of warfare. And for the time being, Hamas is in no hurry.
Well, I want to go back to public opinion, which is also going to be perhaps impacting both sides. Ido, you are a peace activist based in Tel Aviv, and you took the initiative as a citizen to send over supplies to the Gaza Strip only this week, right?
Yes, under the umbrella of Caritas Internationalis. Yes, I have. Yes.
So it was in a civil initiative, meaning no government or any kind of agency was behind this, or was there? The organization?
There was. I only found out post factum after getting involved in it. It all began by seeing a post that a friend of mine had shared. Later on, I found out that a Catholic International Red Cross sort of organization named Caritas Internationalis was involved and is behind it, and somehow miraculously found a way to gather these supplies and cross the border and bring those supplies to the Gazans.
I'm going to just cut you off for 1 second. We're going to get an update from Dr. Alan Marcus, the Director of Strategic Planning in the city of Ashkelon. Dr. Marcus, thank you for joining us.
Welcome to everybody this morning.
Of course, we're an hour and a half almost after the proposed ceasefire was due to be extended, but Ashkelon residents at 8:02 woke up to code red sirens.
Yep, that included me.
That included you. Were you surprised? Yeah. Do you think citizens were surprised?
No, not at all. No, we know the Hamas, and we know that that at every opportunity they have a chance to shoot at us. They will be shooting at us. We're not surprised, even though we took about 7% of the total amount of rockets that were shot on total of the country in the last 30 days. 24% of those shot down were shot down over Ashkelon. So we're not surprised at all.
And we are hearing, of course, different municipalities farther north of you, of course, Rishon LeZion, just one of them, reopening their bomb shelters. Did Ashkelon ever actually close the bomb shelters?
We had only closed them for activities for children, which we then turned into using about 50 buses a day or more. We're leaving the city for our activities outside the city. We're still on the same, of course this is Friday, so there isn't any outside activities today, but we're still staying on the same level. We have a meeting this afternoon, or actually at noontime, and we will be discussing further steps at that time, if necessary.
And in terms of summer camps and so forth, July that was basically shut down in Ashkelon, and many of the residents did find other places around the country to stay for July. Now that many of them have come back, do you think, or do you expect many residents to leave again?
No, first of all, not many residents left Ashkelon.
Okay.
On the weekends, yes, a lot of people went for quiet and left the city on the weekends. But not that many people left the city, and that is a direct result of the success that we had as far as providing a huge amount. We had 140 bomb shelters used, private as well as public, for activities for the children. Mm-hmm. At some point, we phased those out when the amount of rockets being shot at us were less.
Right.
And we were having up to 50 buses a day taking people to Tel Aviv and to the north. So we provided a huge amount of alternative activities for the children, and there was really no real reason to leave the city.
Dr. Alan Marcus is wishing a quieter day, not the way it started. Thank you for joining us from Ashkelon. Ido, I want to go back to you. So what was the supplies that you were actually able to send over to Gaza Strip, and who are the people that donated?
I personally I was able to luckily find a Costco-like a place in Bnei Brak who specializes in large quantities of stuff. So the main need, according to the post that I saw, was a lot of baby stuff. So a lot of baby food, Similac, Materna, and so forth. A lot of diapers, female hygiene products, wet towels, canned goods. I can't remember everything right now. It's just a lot of.
But people were joining this effort. You saw that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Was it
my
hard
concern.
to convince people?
Not at all. It was surprisingly. I thought I would be there alone with my stuff, and therefore I packed a car full of stuff and went there. But as the day progressed, I remained there and helped organize supplies. This humongous convoy of people from all over the place: Arab Israelis, American Jews. People from all over the spectrum. It just seemed that people just went and sort of like emptied their pantries and their their closets into boxes and into garbage bags, and just packed their cars and flooded the church. And I actually took a panoramic picture at the end of the day, and it's been day one. We have day two today and another day tomorrow, and the church is jam-packed with goods, and it's unbelievable, the goodwill of people.
And how will it be sent to people in the Gaza Strip? And will you be able to hear reactions, or at least send a note that it's from the residents of Tel Aviv?
We were the girl Angie that's sort of kind of spearheading that and is directly communicating with Caritas, is putting a little notelet inside every one of those, kind of like, we love you, like, hang tight, everything is going to be okay type of thing. So as far as the response, it's hard to hear. I mean, the borders are so tight closed that it's hard to tell. All we can do is kind of just send the stuff over there and hope
a great civil effort. Thank you for joining us. We're going to be back after a 2-minute break. Welcome back to I-24 News Morning Edition, a special broadcast this morning. It is day 32 of Operation Protective Edge. A ceasefire that was due to be extended at 8 a.m. today, just an hour and a half ago, has been broken after more than 10 rockets were fired by both Islamic Jihad and Hamas from the Gaza Strip into Israel. One rocket was at least intercepted over the skies of Ashkelon. Another fell into an Eshkol Regional Council village, causing no injuries or damage. 3 rockets, I will correct myself, have fallen in the Eshkol area, 1 inside a village. We're hearing reports of Israeli right-wing politicians and ministers calling for a consideration of Israel to consider retaking Gaza. We are, of course, going to be updating as this develops. With me now in studio is the President and Chief Rabbi for Rabbis for Human Rights, Rabbi Arik Ashelman. Thank you for joining us. The Chief Cameraman of Channel 2 News here in Israel, Eyal Ben Yaish. Thank you, Eyal, for joining us. And I-24 News correspondent Gabi Tartakovsky. You will be here later with some headlines. Rabbi, I do want to start with you. Of course, we're talking throughout every operation, and these operations do keep on, or seem to be every two years or so on the last past decade. The human rights issues is always going to be an issue that's dire, mainly, and this is we're hearing from the Israeli government for weeks now, because of the situation in the Gaza Strip to begin with. Hamas rockets in civilian population, within mosques and schools. Is there somewhere to avoid the violation of human rights in this kind of conflict?
When you have conflict, unfortunately, people die. There's human rights violations, and that's why, ideally, you try to avoid getting to the stage where you get to the lose-lose situation, where either you defend yourself or not, and with a cost for human lives on the other side.
Some will say it has been a lose-lose situation from the beginning.
One could say that. I mean, it depends where you start the timeline. When Hamas was shooting rockets at us, and again this morning when we were saying, if you shoot, we're going to shoot back. Whether you go back to when we imposed a blockade, when we basically sabotaged the peace process, or go back to 1947 when Israel accepted a two-state solution by the UN and the Arab world didn't. It all depends where you start the timeline. However, wherever you start the timeline, no matter how justified, and I do believe we have the right, also according to international law and according to the Jewish tradition, to defend ourselves, you nevertheless have to observe red lines. Even when you are legitimately defending yourselves, there are red lines. We don't have all the facts, but increasingly, when you look at what's happened, you have to strongly suspect that we've crossed those red lines in at least some of the situations without in any way excusing Hamas behavior.
Is it hard to convince, though, the public, the Jewish public around the world and the Israeli public here in Israel, of these red lines when, of course, they're being, fired upon?
It is almost impossible to hold a sane center in this situation, particularly because our cause seems so just this time in particular. But you try to say to anybody that at the same time as I will have arguments with Palestinians and some of their supporters who don't want to say anything criticizing the attempts to murder our citizens, you talk to your average Israeli and try to say that, yes, we can support our right to defend ourselves, and at the same time say they're red lines, and they say that's a contradiction in terms. And they say we're shooting our soldiers in the back, that we're doing something that's traitorous.
And when you call for human rights as rabbis, you're based in Israel, and of course you have the tagline of being a Jewish and considering Jewish tradition when doing so, who are the other organizations that are willing to work with you? And who are there organizations that are not willing because, of course, the background?
Because we're rabbis?
Because you're maybe Jewish or so forth?
Because
when you look at the Gaza Strip, there's many organizations working on the ground, maybe working around the ground, Red Cross and so forth.
So we have generally good working relations with not so much Palestinian organizations, although we do, but also simply with Palestinian mayors. But we work much more in the West Bank than we do in Gaza, where we don't have a staff.
Right.
But there we work on a daily basis with farmers, with village leaders, on the nuts and bolts of protecting human rights. Even in this conflict, for example, we're forgetting the fact that after our 3 yeshiva students were murdered, 4 new settler outposts were set up in the West Bank. We're working on to remove 2 of them. And that's happening as we're all focusing on Gaza.
So who are the in the West Bank that you do work with? Who does cooperate with the organization?
As I said, primarily we are working with village leaders, more
and
at the
willing
grassroots
to
level.
work together.
Absolutely. I can't speak for who isn't working with us, but in general, when we come in, because we've had success in protecting Palestinian human rights, and most people and because we work with people at an eye level. There are sometimes Israeli organizations that, even with good intentions, we have in our hard drive that we're the dominant people here, and sometimes that even repeats itself when you're trying to help out. You want to be like the white knights in shining armor coming to help the poor natives. I think we do our best to work with people really as partners, and people understand that, and because of that, they work with us. And so whether we're talking about villages in the occupied territories, Bedouin villages inside Israel, and when you mentioned where rockets fell on in a village in this last hour and a half,
right.
Of course, we're very concerned about the fact that there is no protection right now for the Bedouin villages in the Negev. We've spoken to the government about it and not gotten much of a response, unfortunately. And we also work at an eye level when we're working with Israeli Jews on economic justice issues.
Does the organization also strive for a political solution, or is this a hands-off kind of topic? We're not going to talk about if it's going to be 2 states or 1 state. We're just worried about the human rights.
Israeli human rights organizations, who are, of course, our main partners on many of these issues, B'Tselem, Physicians for Human Rights, Association for Civil Rights in Israel, Amnesty, Israel Section, and so on and so forth. We do not get into issues of borders or a 1 or a 2 or 10 state solutions. That is simply beyond our mandate as human rights organizations. And we say very simply, whether there will be 1 state or 2 states or borders here or there or any kind of solution this way or that way in Gaza, human rights have to be protected. Even more so when there's a state of conflict.
We're just going to update that there is another code red now in the Eshkol Regional Council as we're speaking. What would you say is the biggest challenge to the violation of human rights? Is it a political challenge because of the government that is in Israel today, or are the facts on the ground? It's physically impossible, perhaps, always to uphold the human rights because of the situation.
Well, I certainly believe that because although we clearly condemn human rights violations either by Israelis or by Palestinians, Israeli and Palestinian citizens and non-combatants have to simply be kept out of this. They cannot be targets. Israel has a greater level of responsibility because we have overwhelmingly greater power. And that means, of course, that we could end the blockade while continuing to make sure that certain kinds of things that could be dangerous to us don't come in. If we were only concerned about security issues and there weren't territorial aspirations, we could have come to an agreement in the West Bank a long time ago. All right, and those are the areas where we have more responsibility because we have greater power. The Jewish tradition, Pirkei Avot, we are told that the sword comes into the world because of justice delayed and justice denied. It doesn't mean that when there's injustice, that gives you a carte blanche to use violence and murder and terror. But the wise person never gets into the situations that the clever person can get out of. And it would be in our interest, as well as in the interest of human rights, as well as the Palestinian interest, to learn the lessons so we remove some of the things that keep us from achieving peace. And then inevitably, as you said at the outset, we get in this 2-year cycle of another war and another war and another war in Gaza.
Unfortunately, that does seem to be the case. We're going to get a quick update now from I-24 News correspondent Michal Divon. Michal, you're on the Israeli-Gaza border this morning. Not the quietest border, as was hoped, perhaps, by the Israeli population.
That's right, Yael. 1.5 hours after the ceasefire has expired and alarms continue to sound throughout the south here, residents are asked to remain 15 seconds within shelters reach. Other than that, Israel is also asking for the reopening of shelters 80 kilometers from the border. So it seems that there's preparation for a continuous fighting. Meanwhile, no word is sound from Cairo. Now, we're seeing some smoke behind us. It's hard to tell at the moment what it is. We know Israel is exercising a lot of patience at this moment, but at the same time, it has to maintain its deterrence. So at some point, we are expecting some form of retaliation for these large amounts of rocket firing towards the south. Not a quiet morning, as you mentioned, some reshuffling of the forces here on the ground. We'll have to wait and see what happens, and hopefully some diplomatic agreement will come about in the next few hours before the situation escalates once again.
And it's important to note, Michal, that the Home Front Command did a few days ago tell residents of the southern communities where you are that they can return back to home, that it is safe to be back at home. Are we going to hear different directives now from the Home Front?
That's right, Yael. Today the picture is very different. Only yesterday we were in Nativ Asara, one of the closest communities to the border, and we saw the returning of most of the residents, a lot of children on the streets, and the sounds were very different. We no longer heard any of the military aircraft. We didn't even hear the drones patrolling the air at the moment. Residents are once again taken 3 days back, told to remain 15 minutes from shelters, not to have any of the activities, especially summer activities for children, held in public areas. So the situation is once again tense. We'll have to wait and see how this day develops. Critical hours.
Critical hours indeed. Michal Divon, I-24 News correspondent there on the Israeli-Gaza border. Thank you for joining us. Eyal Ben Yaish, you are the chief cameraman of the Channel 2 News, one of the biggest news outlets here in Israel. And as I posed the question to the rabbi, you're probably quite used to conflict in this region and trying to maybe capture the most objective footage that you can.
But this is not a regular conflict that we usually cover because this is our home.
Right.
It's different. So actually what we're trying to get is one, the citizen of Israel, and the citizen is our family. So my wife, our children, everybody, just I know. And the other one is just, to see what the Hamas is doing to us. So this kind of two different angles that we try to cover.
But also as an Israeli cameraman, you're not allowed to go into the Gaza Strip and show what's going on there. You're relying, of course, on footage from foreign journalists, of course. How difficult is it for you as a camera person to show that part of the story if you can't really get in?
It's a problem. But, we cannot get inside. It's a very, very dangerous to get inside. We don't want to get inside because it's the conflict between us and to the Hamas. But we just deal with that. We don't have anything to do with this.
When you cover the conflict, as you said, it's a conflict on your own home, so it becomes obviously emotional. Is there a way to differentiate between your professional work that, yes, you're going to show the Israeli public what's happening on the ground, and two, you're worried maybe for your own family, maybe you have family in the south, maybe you want to call and make sure that the Code Red got everyone inside shelters and so forth?
Usually what happens is you're staying in the south, and you see the missiles go up to Tel Aviv, first thing you call to your wife. Everything is okay, and you're shooting, whatever to do. Because we really worry for our family. But we still cover, what we do as journalists, whatever we need to do.
One of the biggest criticisms of the Israeli home front was that people that didn't go get shelter were the ones that were actually injured in the end throughout this conflict. That's also another journalistic dilemma. Should you sit outside and watch, the interception and get it on the best clip that you can get, or should you, of course, seek shelter?
This is the biggest dilemma because me, as the chief cameraman, we get, just SMS. All the crews, when you have a missiles attack, everybody gets into shelters. Mm-hmm. Everybody. If you cannot, you have to put a helmet and a vest. But when you stay there and you see these missiles, you shoot this. Nothing to do. I mean, you cannot just go to the shelter and don't shoot it. It's a very big dilemma.
Even here, we'll say that at I-24, when we have Code Red, we have
go outside and just shooting with a.
No, we have to evacuate the studio, even though you do want to continue the broadcast and show the viewers at home that that we're continuing to report. So that is a dilemma that perhaps all Israeli journalists have felt throughout the last conflict. Did you have any interaction with the foreign journalists, and did you see that they were perhaps acting or working differently than the Israeli journalists?
I didn't so. I saw what's going on the web. This is what happened to the BBC from this Arab from the BBC. It was, I think, but I didn't saw anything. Didn't saw them.
No interaction.
No.
Was there any part that of the conflict? It was maybe one of the longest that we've had in recent years. Many more deaths, of course, many more rockets. That you said, enough. I can't, continue just being, doing my job as a chief cameraman. I'm also a person, and I also need to, work for my family.
No, I mean, I have a very great wife. She supports me and everything. It's very important in this condition. But no, this is my work, and I do it.
This is who you are.
Yeah.
When you when we also talk about the operation, the military parts, a lot of times they send reporters to be embedded with the IDF troops. Were you ever embedded with troops, and what happened? Tell me, give us the scenario of going into Gaza with troops in the middle of the night, really.
I've been there in the middle of the day. I've been in Sajia, and as my wife said, we're really crazy. We're not regular human because
not rational.
We like it. We want to see inside how it's going on. We want to see the damage that they make. The Israeli part and the Palestinian part. It's not it's just you want to see it on your eyes. Mm-hmm. This is the best thing you can do. Just go inside and see it. I will go to Gaza with working there. Where the Hamas is around me, but go with the army and want to see what happened there.
What part of the operation will you remember most in terms of your professional work? Is there a certain part where, I don't know?
The first part, because we've been in Nativ Asara. Mm-hmm. We make
a town near the Gaza border.
Near the Gaza border. And the first attack to Tel Aviv, Tel Aviv was about 30 missiles that shot. It was just above us. Mm-hmm. About 30 missiles just above us, and just you see all the missiles above your head, and they're going to Tel Aviv. I think it was the first or the second day of this war or this operation.
And I'm going back on the emotional part because it is quite difficult to be an Israeli and also to cover it objectively. Were there any, when you saw soldiers coming out of the Gaza Strip, wounded soldiers, when you saw perhaps the destruction that the Israeli military was doing in Gaza, were there parts where it's hard to, still be this objective journalist?
It's still hard because I'm Israeli. I'm still doing Army Reserve. Mm-hmm. I'm part of this.
The establishment,
I'm part of them. Maybe now or not, but I'm part of them. So it's very hard, but you just have to be professional and go on.
And we're going to hope now that the ceasefire it has been broken, but it's going to hopefully be a quieter weekend. Thank you for joining us. Gabi, you have some headlines from around the world. Where are you starting from?
We're starting right here in Israel. The Jerusalem reports that President Rivlin urges residents of the south to return to their homes. Obviously, this was prior to the expiring of the current ceasefire. Right. President Rivlin met the residents of Kibbutz Kfar Aza. There were about 50 residents who actually stayed throughout the operation. Over 200 children were evacuated, and adults were also left during this operation, fearing for their safety. It was a very tense meeting. I mean, President Rivlin said that future history will prove the significance of Operation Protective Edge, but it seems as if the residents were not that impressed and are eager for immediate answer. They said some very harsh words to President Rivlin, saying, "We don't lead a normal life. The fear of living under terror tunnels is unbearable," and they do not see any comfort in the IDF actions because they feel like the next round of conflict is bound to happen very soon.
And we're seeing it this morning, of course.
And we saw it this morning already.
Right. So the President Rivlin is maybe one of his first tasks as president. He's brand new president, just got into office. Is this war, and of course consoling the public. He can't really take a political stance.
No, and there is a concerning trend because a new poll showed that about 20% of Israeli residents in the Negev region, southern Israel, actually consider relocating their homes and families because of the recent conflict. So there's a lot to be done, both in public diplomacy and in the security situation as well.
And economically, of course.
Economically, it will be devastating.
Right. For those residents. What else do you have?
The Times of Israel reports about a very unfortunate incident in Sydney, Australia. A group of 5 teenagers stormed a bus with 25 Jewish students, calling them Heil Hitler, Kill the Jews, and Free Palestine. Wow. No one was injured during this racist attack. They even threatened to slit the children's throats. This group of teenagers was intoxicated and was later arrested because of a different incident. Only later did they find out that those were the same teenagers who stormed the bus. The Sydney police claims that the juveniles are known to the police, and this is a random and opportunistic incident.
Meaning it's not a trend that we're seeing.
It's not a trend. It's at least they try to convey the message as if this was not part of an international incident waiting to explode, but nonetheless security around Jewish schools and institutions in Sydney was beefed up because of that incident. So there's no taking chances, regardless.
And this also comes after other incidents in Europe that had similar cases. What else do you have?
We spoke a lot about the British press and the British media during this conflict. The Guardian reports that a Gaza appeal is set to air today, on Friday, on BBC and Sky. The Disasters Emergency Committee is about to publish a Gaza appeal calling for donations to help the Gaza casualties and residents. The prior appeal that the organization has made during Pillar of Defense was censored by the BBC, and so this is a very interesting shift. BBC then claimed that screening the humanitarian appeal could be interpreted as taking a political stance. Apparently now that's not the case. The Disasters Emergency Committee is a large organization, basically comprises of 13 major UK charities, including the British Red Cross. They have raised over than £1 billion since it was established. So this is a massive organization that finally gets his plea to be aired on major British news outlets.
Okay. We saw also Israeli civilians, Tel Aviv residents, taking the initiative to do so as well. So it's not only a British-bound ship. There's also, here in Israel, people are worried also for of course, the well-being of Gaza residents.
Definitely. Another worrying incident, Globes reports 3 Gaza writings were discovered in a Lufthansa airplane en route to Israel. The Lufthansa flight was departing from Frankfurt. It had a brief stop in Athens, and once it landed here in Ben Gurion Airport, they found 3 Gaza writings on the plane's cargo hold. The staff says it had nothing to do with it. They were not aware of this, and Lufthansa announced it strongly condemns the incident and will investigate in order to find the responsible person for it and to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. But this is, apart from the political stand, this is a security issue. I mean, the crew should know if someone has this access to the plane's cargo. It could have been a bomb rather than a...
Because the actual writing is not really a security issue.
No.
Perhaps it was blown out of proportion.
Yes, it's an unfortunate incident, perhaps a minor diplomacy incident, but a diplomatic incident. But this is basically a really severe security breach, which needs to be investigated regardless of any political stance.
Indeed. What else do you have?
Here's a nice story for a change.
We need one.
Yes. Mako reports that a landlord waived a month's rent to his tenant, an IDF reserve soldier who served a month in Gaza. 20-year-old Nir Weintraub from Jerusalem was called for reserve service in early July. He spent the entire month fighting in Gaza. During the operation, his landlord texted him, asking him, is everything okay? Are you still serving in Gaza? He said, I was dismissed just a day ago. And he said, you know what? You can forget about this month's rent. You don't have to pay me this October. Weintraub was actually planning to pay his rent with the IDF grant he was about to receive from his current service. And his landlord, Amnon Shapira, also rents an apartment in Tel Aviv. Apparently, to pay rent for an apartment in Tel Aviv, you still need to be a lord in Jerusalem. And he said that, he served as well for 12 years in the IDF military service as a reserve soldier, and this is a time for solidarity. And he expects that if it was him, his Tel Aviv landlords would have done the same and waived his rent.
We can only hope.
Yes,
you're calling out to landlords. Of Tel Aviv.
I'm calling to landlords nationwide, waive the rent. It's really not that essential. People are really too busy to pay rent and suffer as it is.
Could be a solution for the housing problem here in Israel, but we'll get to that later after all of this. What else do you have?
Sports-wise, Ynet reports that Andy Ram, the iconic tennis player, says he won't play outside of Israel. Now, we have discussed this before, that the International Tennis Association demands relocating the next Davis Cup games between Israel and Argentina. Andy Ram, who announced his retirement, said that only in Israel could he enjoy a proper farewell ceremony. He does not wish to play outside of Israel during his last games, and the Israel now has about 5 days to announce what other alternative location will the Israeli team will play, because they are banned to play in Israel for the time being.
And he's, of course, willing to give up his playing for the cause, of course, of strong solidarity.
Yes, and he just wants to play in front of the home crowd. He said that the Israeli team was able to win over favorable opponents because of the home crowd, and because this is basically his last game as a professional after winning 3 Grand Slam tournaments. He wants to do it the proper way, and just in Nicosia is not the proper setting for retirement for an Israeli sportsman.
I guess not. Anything else?
Yes, staying on sports, Facebook saw a very emotional post by Leo Messi saying this cycle of senseless violence must stop. He posted on his own personal Facebook page. He's been followed by 60 million fans, so there is a lot of attention going on to it, both in Arabic and in English, saying, as a father and as a UN's goodwill ambassador, I'm horrified for this conflict. The children are not to blame.
And he's calling, of course, for the children, making a very big point of not trying to blame both sides, but talking about the children. Gabi, thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us this morning. We're finished for this morning. Next up are the headlines from the I-24 news desk. It is day 32 of Operation Protective Edge. This was a special broadcast. We will be covering the entire operation and the outcome of today throughout the day here at I-24 News. Next up are the headlines.